Weak leaders do not think they are weak. That is the problem. They show up every day, they put in the hours, they run the meetings, they send the emails, and they genuinely believe they are leading, but their team knows the truth. The gap between what a leader thinks they're doing and what their people actually experience is one of the most dangerous blind spots in any organization. I know this because I lived it. I was a weak leader once, and I had a moment in my leadership that forced me to actually confront this. It was one of the most important leadership lessons of my career. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 signs, 5 things that weak leaders do, often without realizing it. And if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize 1 or 2 of these in your own leadership. That is not a bad thing. That is the beginning of getting better. My name is Jason Harris, and I spent nearly 30 years in the United States Air Force flying missions around the world. I've flown in combat operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Horn of Africa. I've flown 11 combat missions, or 11 combat deployments, more than 470 combat missions. Today, I fly the Boeing 777 airplane for American Airlines with nearly 300 people behind me every flight. And I have taken what I learned in the cockpit into companies like Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, and Ford, and many others. What I have seen over and over is this: the organizations that win are not the ones with the best strategy. They're the ones where people actually trust each other. And most leaders have never been taught how to build that kind of trust. In today's video, we're going to break down what it is about weak leadership. Not the obvious kind, not the screaming boss or the absent manager, the quiet kind. The kind that looks like leadership on the surface, but slowly drains trust from every person on your team. I'm going to give you 5 signs, 5 patterns I've seen in the military and corporate America and in my own leadership when I personally got it wrong. Some of these are going to make you uncomfortable, and that's good. That is how you know that you're paying attention. So let's get into it. Sign number 1. You confuse being in charge with being a leader. There's a huge difference between being a boss, being a manager, and being a leader. And most people have likely worked for all 3. The boss says, do what I say, do what I tell you, and don't do what I do. The manager says, let's make sure that you're doing it right. The leader says, let me understand what you need so we can get this done together. Patrick Lencioni wrote that the biggest challenge for leaders is not strategy or vision. It is the messy, emotional work of building a team that actually trusts each other. And most people in positions of power, they skip that work entirely. They rely on the title, they rely on authority, and they call it leadership. A title gives you authority over people, but authority is not influence. Authority can make people show up on time. It cannot make them care. It cannot make them bring their best ideas. It cannot make them stay. You manage projects and systems. You lead people. The moment you start managing people like a spreadsheet, you've already lost them. They'll do the work, but they will not do their best work. Think about the best leader that you've ever worked for. I guarantee you it was not the one with the biggest title. It was the one who made you feel like your contribution mattered. I've walked into companies where the CEO, they have the big, beautiful corner office, they've got the reserved parking spot, and they've got their name somewhere in the building. And nobody on the team will tell them the truth. That is not leadership. That's a kingdom. Simon Sinek said it well. Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of the people in your charge. And weak leaders get those 2 things confused every single day. Here's what I've learned. Authority can make people follow orders. Leadership makes them care about the mission. And when people care, they will do things that no title, no bonus, and no policy could ever require. If the only reason your team listens to you is because of your position, that is your first sign. Here's my question for you. If you lost your title tomorrow, would your team still follow you? Would they still come to you for guidance? If the answer makes you pause, that tells you something right there. Sign number 2, your team has stopped pushing back. Most leaders, they celebrate agreement. They walk out of a meeting where everyone nodded and thinks, great meeting, everyone is aligned. That is not alignment. That is silence. And silence in an organization is never a good sign. When your team stops disagreeing with you, it does not mean that you are right. It means that they have decided it is not worth the risk to tell you otherwise. Somewhere along the way, you sent a signal that said, I don't want to hear it. Maybe you rolled your eyes. Maybe you cut someone off, didn't even realize it. Maybe you said, let's just go ahead and move on when someone actually raised a legitimate concern. You probably don't even remember what that thing is that you did. but I promise you they do, and the people in the room remembers. Weak leaders, they celebrate quiet rooms. Strong leaders, they get nervous when no one pushes back, because a room full of agreement is usually a room full of people who have given up trying. What I tell leaders all the time is disagreement is not disrespect, it's data. When someone on your team challenges your idea, they're telling you that they care enough to risk being uncomfortable. The moment they stop is the moment you have lost something you cannot easily get back. Think about the last meeting that you've ran. How many people offered a different perspective? If the answer is 0, that is not because your idea was perfect. It's because your culture made it too expensive to disagree with you. I've seen this destroy companies from the inside. The leader who only hears yes ends up making decisions that are based on incomplete information. And by the time they realize it, the damage is done and the best people have already left. Here's what I know. The real test of leadership is not whether your team agrees with you. It is whether they feel safe enough to disagree with you. If your people have stopped pushing back, that's not loyalty. That is survival. And a team that's in survival mode will never perform at the level you need when it matters most. So ask yourself this. When was the last time someone on your team openly disagreed with you in a meeting? If you can't remember, do not assume that it's because you're always just right and so smart. Assume it's because they've stopped trying. Sign number 3, you have never admitted that you got it wrong. I need to tell you something that most leadership individuals, most leadership speakers will never tell you. There was a moment in my leadership career when I had to confront a blind spot in how I was leading. I was sitting as a squadron commander in the Air Force. I was responsible for the mission. I was responsible for the people. I was responsible for significant decisions that actually mattered. And like a lot of leaders in that position, I believed that being decisive meant always having the answer. One day, we finished a planning meeting. We walked out with a decision, we had a plan laid out, and everyone in the room nodded in agreement with me. From my perspective, it looked like everyone was in alignment. The mission was clear, the plan was set, and we were ready to move out. But later on, one of my officers pulled me aside and said something that I've never forgotten. She said, "Sir, we knew what you wanted. So we just went along with you and went along with the idea." And that stopped me in my tracks. Because what I realized in that moment was this: my team had stopped pushing back. Not because they didn't care, not because they didn't have better ideas, but because somewhere along the way, I had unintentionally made it easier to agree with me than to challenge me. That was a gut check. It forced me to look in the mirror and ask a hard question. Was I creating a culture where people felt safe to tell the truth? Or was I creating a culture where people simply told the leader what they thought he wanted to hear? And the moment your team stops telling you the truth, leadership has already started to fail. That experience changed everything about how I led from that moment forward. It taught me that conviction without curiosity, it breaks trust. You can be clear and decisive, and you could still be wrong. If you never admit that, your team will stop telling you those things. Weak leaders protect their image. Strong leaders protect their team's ability to tell the truth. Those are two very different things. How many leaders do you know who have ever stood in front of their team and said, "I was wrong, and here's what I'm going to do differently. Here's what I'm going to change"? That takes more courage than any bold strategy or big decisions. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the fastest way to build trust. When your team sees that you own your mistakes, they learn two things. This person is honest, and it's safe for me to be honest too. Patrick Lencioni calls this the absence of vulnerability. When the leader will not go first, nobody does. And you end up with a team that hides mistakes instead of learning from them. Here's what that moment taught me. The strongest leaders that I have ever met are not the ones who got it right every single time. They are the ones who owned it when they got it wrong. Your team doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest. And a leader who cannot say that I was wrong will eventually lead a team that can't say it either. Here's the honest question. When was the last time you admitted to your team that you made a mistake? Not a small one, safe one, a real one. If you can't remember, that's sign number 3. Sign number 4, you only show up when there is a problem. Think about the last 10 conversations you had with someone on your team. How many of those were about a task, a problem, a deadline, or something that went wrong? And how many were actually about them, about who they are, what they care about, where they want to go in their careers? If almost every conversation you have with your people is transactional, they have learned something about you. This person only talks to me and shows up when they need something. And when that is the pattern, your team gives you compliance. They don't give you commitment. Connection leads to commitment. Commitment leads to accountability, and accountability leads to trust. You cannot skip to step 3. The chain starts with connection, and connection requires showing up when you don't need anything from someone. What I tell leaders is do stay assessments instead of exit interviews. An exit interview, that's too late. By the time someone sits in that chair, they're done. The question is not why are you leaving? The question is why are you staying, and what would make you want to stay here longer? And you should be asking that on a regular Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, not on someone's last day. Weak leaders schedule connection in the calendar once a quarter. Strong leaders, they weave it in to how they operate every single day. And please stop with the pizza parties. Your team doesn't need another pizza party. What they need to feel is like their leader actually knows who they are and cares. No mandatory fun event is going to fix the relationships that only exist when there's a problem to solve. The biggest mistakes that leaders make is confusing being liked with being connected. Connection is not about being popular. It's about actually being present. It's about earning the right to have the hard conversations and proving that you care about the easy ones too. Here's what I've learned about connection. It can't be outsourced to HR, and it can't be reduced to an annual survey. Connection is what happens when a leader shows up for their people. No agenda, no project updates, no ask, just being present. If the only time that your team hears from you is when something is wrong, I promise you, you are not building trust. You're building anxiety. Ask yourself this. Outside of the work tasks, the deadlines, and the problems, when was the last time you had a real conversation with someone on your team about who they are and what matters to them? And if you can't remember, that's sign number 4. Sign number 5, you think that leadership is about you. This is the one that ties everything together, and it is the hardest one for leaders to hear. Weak leaders measure success by their own performance. Did I hit my numbers? Did I get the promotion? Did I get recognized? I. Strong leaders measure success by what their people accomplish. Did my people grow? Did someone on my team get promoted? Did I develop a leader who no longer needs me? The moment leadership becomes about you, it stops being about leadership. It becomes about performance, and your team can feel the difference. I've met leaders who can tell you every award that they won, but they can't tell you any career goals of the people that are sitting right outside their office door. That's not leadership. That is ego with a title. The best leaders I've ever served with in the cockpit and in business all had one thing in common. They measured their success by the success of the people around them, not by their own scoreboard. So the question is not, am I a good leader? The question is, are the people around me better because of how I lead? If you can't point to someone whose career or life has changed because you invested in them, that should concern and bother you. Every time a leader makes it about themselves, trust erodes. Every time a leader makes it about their people, trust compounds and it goes up. It is that simple, and it is that hard. Leadership is not a title. It is a responsibility someone chooses in the moment, and that choice has to be about the people that you serve, not the position or title that you hold. Here's the final truth. The legacy of a leader is not measured by what they accomplished. It is measured by what the people they led went on to accomplish. If your leadership is about your career, your recognition, your success, you've missed the entire point. Leadership isn't about you. It never was. Here's my final question. Can you name one person whose career is different because of how you led them? Not because you gave them a task, because you invested in who they are. If you cannot name that one person, that's sign number 5. So let me prepare to land this plane, so to speak. I've given you 5 signs. Number 1, you confuse being in charge with being a leader. Number 2, your team has stopped pushing back. Number 3, you have never admitted you got it wrong. Number 4, you only show up when there is a problem. And number 5, you think leadership is about you. Every single one of these comes back to one thing. The people around you have stopped trusting that you see them, hear them, and are willing to grow alongside them. And that is not a team problem, that is a leadership problem. The good news is this: every one of these signs is fixable, not with a new strategy or a new policy, with a choice. The choice to lead differently tomorrow than you did today. That is what I call leadership. If you want to know exactly where you stand as a leader, I've created a free 2-minute leadership assessment. It takes less than 2 minutes and you will get your score immediately. And it will show you specific areas where your team's trust might be breaking down. The link is in the description. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. I'm putting out content every week for leaders who are done with average and ready to build teams that truly perform. Blue skies, fair winds, and all the best, my friend.